Yo, what's up? I'm KallaTheYapper, and I'm back with another reaction. Today I'm going to react to this video made by Zome that was 2 weeks ago, talking about you are wrong about Dottore. Right? I should clarify this before I start the reaction. I did initially react to this video, but the thing is, I was kind of like, I guess I was like half asleep, or my brain wasn't fully locked into the reaction because I had just did what 3 or 4 reactions on the same day I did this reaction. Mind you, this was like 2 weeks ago when I initially did this reaction, when he initially dropped this video, right? So I already had like 4 or 5 videos done that day, and I did this one, and I was just like not in the right headspace to do the reaction. So I cut off the video. I was like, I'm gonna delete this, let me restart from scratch. So that's what I intend to do today, because I was gonna show my support initially when he dropped the video. So now I know I'm 2 weeks behind, but you know, show my respect and show my support. Actually, I kind of forgot half the shit that happened in this video. But anyway, let's go get this reaction started, shall we?
Apparently, there's a lot of people who really dislike Dottore, and a lot of these people are acting like he's the reincarnation of Epstein or something. But most people,
I mean, when you take in consideration what he's done to children in the Genshin manga before the game release, and what he's done to Kalle, a 4-star character that is friends with Amber, I think the Epstein allegation does fit the bill for Dottore. Right? This nigga has actively experimented on children. Now, it may not be the same thing as like doing, you know, predatory sexual stuff towards children, but nonetheless, it is some really vile shit. Like, this nigga had like got his hands on damn near a whole bunch of children from Mondstadt, so much so that D-Luke like became the Batman, and he was hunting down Dottore and like other Fatui members and like their like bases of operations across Teyvat, because he joins like some underground syndicate. If y'all remember that limited time event that we had back in version, I believe it was version 2, where D-Luke got his new outfit, right? It was all tied to him like hunting down the Fatui because his dad had died at the hands of not a Fatui per se, but he was in possession of a device, a delusion that only the Fatui have, right? So he was kind of seeking his vengeance while at the same time getting justice for people who, you know, got done dirty by the Fatui as an organization. And Dottore was one of them niggas on that list, I'm gonna be honest with you. Anyway, let us continue.
a lot of these people are acting like he's the reincarnation of Epstein or something, but most people simply don't understand him. In fact, I would argue that Dottore might be the best villain we've ever had in the history of Genshin, and he's not as evil as it seems. And I'm not saying this just to glaze him. Dottore genuinely is the most well-written antagonist we've ever had, and we might never get someone like him ever again.
That's a bold claim, but sure. But I ain't gonna lie, to claim that this nigga is not evil is a bold claim to make, especially what I just explained earlier about him doing shit to children, right? Experimenting on children and on Kalle, who was a child at one point, right? This nigga has done some nasty work, so you gonna have to make a strong case for why he ain't evil.
And I know this is a very controversial take, so let me explain why Dottore is not as evil as a lot of you guys think, and why he's the best antagonist in the entire game. First of all, we have to ask ourselves, why do people dislike him so much, and why do people consider him evil? Well, mainly because he's very selfish, he sacrifices others for the sake of his experiments, and he's the reason why a lot of people had to suffer. Those are like the main reasons why people don't like him. And at first you might say, wow, this guy is a really bad person, of course I'm not gonna like him. But this is where you guys fail to understand his character. Now,
I think his character is really easy to understand. Dottore is one of those characters where he's like, the ends justify the means for me, not for like the rest of the world, but just for me and me alone. That's the type of person he is, which is why he sacrifices others, causes pain to other people. Literally, them freaking Hollow Zero bubble domes he made, he was literally fusing human minds into those of animals, and those people were losing their sense of self and just became full-blown animal. Bro, that shit was disgusting. I don't think there's no excuse to be given for that. If that's not evil, I don't know what is.
I'm not gonna like him, but this is where you guys fail to understand his character. Now let me explain why that is, but I warn you, we're about to get really philosophical and we're about to go through some really difficult and mentally challenging questions, so we will have to activate every single brain cell and listen very carefully. Do not watch this if you're not willing to try and understand another character's perspective.
It's crazy. I'm gonna say this right now. I understand Dottore's perspective. Why? Because I watch a lot of Genshin Theory videos, which, speaking of such, I need to pull this up now. Because if I don't pull this up now, for the life of me, it's going to irritate my nerve throughout the rest of this reaction. Hold up. I need to pull this up now. Because this is it's going to perfectly, this is something that's going to perfectly explain Varka's, not Varka, my bad. I meant to say, Dottore as an individual. Hold up. Or in the grand scheme of Dottore. Where's shit? Ashikaya. Here we go. Watch, you about to see what I'm talking about. It's one of her older videos that she made, I think, when this update dropped, when 6.3 dropped. It's one of these videos I watched. Hidden Secrets. The Death of an Author. Yeah, here we go. This one right here. This was a month ago. There was a line she said here that perfectly encapsulates Dottore and what he seeks to do.
There's definitely some kind of weird timey-wimey BS going on into that. I mean, just...
It's around... Read the Rainbow... Sky and the Butterfly... Closing Thoughts. It was somewhere around here. I can't fully remember. She said something along the line. Oh, I think it's maybe right here. Let me play right here.
Recap. The Moons. They wrote the story of the world in Nibelung's place, so they were basically like Anya's pens, but for Nibelung. And that's why Dottore wanted their power to become a pseudo-descender. He wanted to become an author, so the world could no longer control him, he would control the world. Now, I think he's attempted to do this a couple of times, but his most recent and noteworthy attempt might have been with Wanderer. Yes, on the one hand, he was trying to make Wanderer into a god, but he never specified what kind of god he was trying to make him into, or even if he expected it to work at all. And this experiment hinged on the power of the Gnosis, which is a fragment of another Descender. So his hypothesis was probably, can I turn someone into a Descender using a fragment of another Descender? To which the answer appears to have been no. So he probably deemed this experiment a failure and moved on to trying to capture the moons. Now here's a question that I don't think any of you have asked yourselves. Where do you think the moons did all of this writing, all of this weaving of fate? Well, in Anya's story...
No. We may come back to this, but I think that line right there was probably the most important thing for Dottore's character, for us to understand what exactly is his objective, right? As we proceed through Zome's video.
I don't want anybody in the comments saying that I support Dottore's actions or anything like that. I'm simply explaining him as a character from a philosophical standpoint so that you guys can understand him better. But
I'm gonna say this right now. Anybody who's gonna jump the gun to be like, oh, you support... Bro, it's a fictional character. You got niggas out here gassing up villainous characters from other series and being like, it is what it is, twin. Rip Bozo. This nigga thought they could fight Madara. They thought they could fight Aizen and they got cooked. It is what it is. I call that collateral damage. Like, people say all type of crazy shit supporting their villainous characters because they love their villainous characters because they're awesome. Like anybody trying to be like, oh, you support this fictional character's actions? Yes, I do, obviously, because he's a villain for the story. I expect a villain to act villainous. Anyway, it ain't even that deep. Let us continue.
As a character from a philosophical standpoint so that you guys can understand him better. But now, let's get into it. In order for us to understand why Dottore is acting the way he is and why it's not necessarily wrong from a philosophical standpoint, we have to go back to the Archon quest and revisit some of the things he said. At the end of Act 7, Dottore shows the traveler a false reality that he created using his powers, in which everything is perfect and everyone gets to live a peaceful life, which technically isn't necessarily evil. If anything, it could actually be very helpful.
Is this not a beautiful city? People live in peace and find joy in their work. The streets are safe. People can even leave their doors unlocked at night. You might say it is the Elysium everyone dreams.
Peep game, you might say, but we know this shit was fake as fuck and was manifested by an individual who does not care for the lives of other people. He just did this stuff to try to persuade the traveler to join them. That's all this was. This wasn't done in earnest.
Dreams of. All available data indicates your values and worldview conform with the mainstream. This kind of society should be quite to your taste.
False beauty is deceitful. Lies are to no one's taste.
However, the traveler responds saying that it's false beauty and it's something nobody would ever want, without providing any actual counter-argument beyond that.
I don't think there's need to be like a in-depth counter. Hold on, I'll provide my argument. I don't think there's a need for an in-depth counter argument to what the traveler is like responding to, or from the traveler side of the aisle, right? Because we know it's bullshit, right? Again, let's go back to Amphorius, right? Amphorius's world, you could argue, oh, it was beautiful and all this other things, but like, thanks to Lygus wanting to create Iron Tomb, he put these people through constant hell over and over and over and over again. So they knew this shit was, until they realized, oh, this shit is fake. Our lives were nothing more than characters on a stage while the spectator sits here and watches us go through this hell over and over again. So this shit is fake. It's fraudulent. We will fight against this until the true sun finally emerges. The true dawn, rather. That's what I meant to say, right? And in the world of Teyvat, they essentially have something like that going on now. They live under a false sky, a firmament. So it's like, and Dottore is one of the few people in the entire world who knows this. So it's like, you know that you live in a world concealed away from the rest of the universe. And you know that it's a preordained fate created by another being rather than like some organic fate, I say with air quotes, that's just like literally made by, you know, the universe itself and not preordained by a being who claims to be a god, right? So it's like, he knows that, and yet he wants to try to tell the traveler, yo, I can make something like this. I can make it all peaceful. Wouldn't you like that since your morals line up with it? My nigga, the traveler would like it only if they did not know the truth that all of it was fake. But you telling them that all that shit is fake to begin with, and they're literally seeing it as BS right in front of their eyes. It's like, bro, you can't persuade me to conform and give you the answer you want, knowing that you just showed me how BS all this shit is in front of me. It's lies. People naturally are going to wake up to the lie, right? Just like the people of Conria, they woke up to the lie when they saw the universe outside of their world. They were like, holy shit. Everything we've been told is a lie. Everything up on tape, that is bullshit. Everything outside of it, we done found crazy technologies. We done harnessed power that these quote-unquote gods claim belongs to them when it doesn't. These niggas are frauds. You get the point I'm making? So it's like, I don't think there's a counter argument that's in depth that needs to even be said here. We know it's a lie, what Dottore is like showing them in front of their face. It's bullshit. We know it is. But he's going to try to argue intellectually to try to make himself sound like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, I'm pretty sure my argument is pretty sound. Yours doesn't really sound in comparison, right?
Nobody would ever want without providing any actual counter-argument beyond that. And then Dottore proceeds to ask her something really interesting.
I wonder, is it your moral standards that are too high? Or your expectations of reality? Answer me this. If someone existed in a sweet dream from the moment they were born, a dream in which they never once felt pain, which do you think they would consider superior? The dream or the reality?
As of this moment, the traveler didn't have an answer for this question, right? Actually, hold up. I don't know if this scene changes depending on whether or not you did Durin's story quest, because Durin did come out right before 6.3 dropped, right? So I don't know if this changed depending on, this scene has two versions of it depending on if you did Durin's story quest. But I can confidently say that after doing Durin's story quest, without a shadow of a doubt, the person who was born inside the dream would choose reality versus the dream, blatantly, without a shadow of a doubt.
That's pure sophistry. It has nothing to do with your actions.
Once again, the traveler is unable to answer the question.
Hold up.
Do with your
Or the reality?
That's pure sophistry. It has nothing to do with your actions.
Actually, let's search up this word right quick. Let's search up sophistry. Let's see if I can search this word up. Wait, how do you pronounce it? Hold up. Sophistry. Sophistry. The use of fallacious arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving. A fallacious argument. For example of a person claiming a controversial law is pro-freedom while secretly intending to increase governmental control, use twisted logic and emotional appeals to hide the actual negative consequences and persuade people it's beneficial. This is what Dottore is doing. The definition of this word and the traveler calling them out on it right here is 100% it's the truth, because Dottore is only doing this. The only reason they're pressing them, the only reason they're hitting them with all these arguments and like trying to appeal to their emotion and throughout this entire conversation segment of the story is purely to get the traveler to be on their side. But we know what the doctor actually wants. The doctor only wants something that benefits him. He doesn't care if it benefits someone else. His main objective is to benefit him. Like I showed at the beginning of the reaction, right? With Ash Sky's video, right? The whole thing of Dottore wanting to become the author of the world rather than letting the world, be his author. Right? Actually, oh my goodness, I ain't gonna lie, this whole video is actually really good in relation to Dottore and just like everything we've done, because this does mention Durin's story quest in here. So it's like, it's really good. Hold on, let's play a little bit of this.
Explain why in the Nod Cry teaser trailer, the time when the Moon Sisters governed the world was also a time when there was no separation between life and death. The story of time was a work in progress. So Nibelung's out there in deep space, trying to figure out how to write the best future for his little world in light of this abyssal threat that Voyager warned him about. And along comes this descender who reads the story and effectively hits publish. And as an author, Nibelung would have been mostly powerless against a reader. So obviously the only option left to him was to try and use the power of the forbidden knowledge, the abyssal ink, to try to erase the first descender's existence. Which obviously didn't work, but it could explain why Genshin talks about blackened suns all the time. Because, one of the names given to the heavenly principles is Phanes, who is a deity whose body is made entirely of light. And yes, it is also another way to talk about an eclipse, a blackened sun. But remember, Nibelung's pens would have been the moons, so I still think this fits pretty nicely, especially since he turned the moons into a weapon. But okay, so, recap. The moons. They wrote the story of the world in Nibelung's place, so they were basically like Anya's pens, but for Nibelung. And that's why Dottore wanted their power to become a pseudo-descender. He wanted to become an author, so the world could no longer control him, he would control the world. Now, I think...
And we know this to be true because he in the boss fight against Dottore, right? He's like, yo, I'm going to use all of you for my grand experiment. You're nothing more but tools for my grand experiment, right? That's him wanting to control the world and you make the world his little experiment, which he does also admit before that boss fight when they're still talking with the Traveler, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly.
Actions.
Once again, the Traveler is unable to answer the question and instead calls it sophistry, to which Dottore answers with a very important fact.
As I suspected, you have yet to understand all of this for what it really is.
Now, the reason why this moment is so interesting is because it tells us that we don't know why Dottore is doing all this in the first place. What if he's doing it to help humanity in the end? If the Traveler calls it sophistry, which essentially means she thinks Dottore is trying to deceive her by showing her all this, and Dottore responds saying that she doesn't understand what all of this is.
Actually, the whole thing of the whole what if he's doing this for humanity is the first immediate flaw of misunderstanding this nigga's character. Every piece of information we've gotten, this is no disrespect towards Uzome, but every piece of information we've gotten literally throughout the entire game, even the limited time event quest that happened right before version 6.3 dropped, right? Where we went back to the desert, we went back to Sumeru, found Layla in the underground ruin or whatever, and we were looking through all those notes, right? It was even proven that Dottore was accompanied by Layla's ancestor, because they were both trapped underneath or trapped in a ruin with Ibis, one of the followers of King Deshret, I believe, right? And it proved to us that this nigga Dottore did not care for the lives of anyone else but his own. He was only interested in anything that benefited him. So we can't really claim that, oh, what if he wants to do this to help humanity? That's a big if, because it goes against what we already know of Dottore, thanks to his own actions proven to us, or even rather shown to us through other pieces of like lore up to this point. Like, did we forget what this nigga did to Niwa, who was a friend of the Wanderer, who helped the Wanderer, view himself a little bit more as a human, and he, orchestrated the entire downfall of the furnace in Inazuma, and killed Niwa, and lied about it, being like, oh, that nigga Niwa left you here with this problem, Wanderer. Here's his heart in his box. It'll make you human. Like, this nigga only does shit for himself. He is the embodiment of me, myself, and I. That's the whole embodiment of Dottore's character, right? If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure even at the end of Sumeru's Archon quest, this iteration of Dottore literally says, you see, actually, I think this is better for me to pull up the scene, actually, because just saying it ain't not gonna do it justice. Hold up, give me a second. Nahida talks with... No, come on. That's not what I clicked.
Did all of this right.
Back up. All right. Nahida talks with Dottore. Yeah, borrow this. I don't know why it's in this form. There we go. That's better.
All the precious time I wasted has finally paid off.
The doctor! What have you done?
Just a type of sound wave.
Here again now.
I left Sumeru, but I also stayed in Sumeru. Even the god of wisdom is restricted by the habits of cognition. How disappointing.
You mean there are many different versions of you in this world?
An astute guess.
It's around right here, I believe.
And if so, how do the Fatui plan to deal with the consequences? Do you dare to gamble such a possibility with me?
Gamble? How surprising. I thought you would show evidence or use rigorous reasoning to prove your point. The word gamble is the last thing I expected to hear from the god of wisdom. But this is a clever move. You must have
It
seen...
must have been around here. Hold up.
So this is how you wish to restrict me. They require extremely rare... A suitably wise decision on your part. Yes, how very interesting. Can I assume that you have long been wary of me? Among all the versions of me, this segment you see now is the most selfish. If it weren't me, your idea wouldn't have worked.
Boom. There we go. Literally says it out of his fucking mouth. He is the most selfish. So even this line of, oh, what if he's doing this to help humanity is genuine. Unfortunately, bullshit. This nigga does not care about humanity. He only cares about himself.
First place, what if he's doing it to help humanity in the end? If the traveler calls it sophistry, which essentially means she thinks Dottore is trying to deceive her by
Which he is.
showing her all this, and Dottore responds saying that she doesn't understand what all of this is for, it indicates that this false reality isn't, just something he created to manipulate the traveler, but rather something that he actually had in mind. And a false...
I disagree. I feel like we're assuming a lot of good intention on Dottore's part. That's me. That's how I'm reading this as. We're assuming a lot of good intention from Dottore, knowing how disgusting of an individual this nigga is.
It indicates that this...
Without a shadow of a doubt, he did make up this whole little thing around us for the sake of, just deceiving the traveler to play the emotional mind game on him and the intellectual argument. Like I said earlier with the definition of sophistry, right? Twisted logic and emotional appeal using deception, twisted logic and emotional appeals while actually hiding the negative consequences. Because let's be real, if Dottore were to become the new god of Teyvat, so many people will suffer. We literally see it in his little Hollow Zero bubble domes where people are literally being merged with animals and they're suffering. So it's like, knowing that he has done that, it's like, if he really was benevolent, why in the F did he do that? Mind you, that took place before they got their the doctor got their hands on the traveler, mind you. So he did that before this whole moment. If he was truly benevolent, he would have never done that to them people.
Bond saying that she doesn't understand what all of this is for.
Honestly, if he was truly benevolent, he would have shown them the truth of the world and everything that exists in it, rather than try to fuse them with animals.
It indicates that this false reality isn't, just something he created to manipulate the traveler, but rather something that he actually had in mind. And a false reality in which everything is peaceful isn't evil at all. If anything, it shows that he's at least somewhat interested in making the world a better place.
Again, we're assuming a lot of good intention from Dottore making this claim. But the thing is, let's make the argument. Okay, let's make the argument that he is doing this out of a goodness of his heart, out of good intentions, right? Could we not make the same argument for the heavenly principles? The heavenly principles literally brought humanity to this world and terraformed it so that humans could live on it, right? For whatever reason that they have for why they wanted to find a place for humans to live on. We find out that the heavenly principles brought humans here thanks to the Natlan Archon quest and what we found out in the Nightcry story as well, thanks to the Moon Sisters, right? And we find out that the heavenly principles became paranoid and then started dropping down their celestial nails on human civilizations as well. So it's like, even though they did something benevolent, they still hurt humanity in the end because they didn't want humanity to obtain power, this threatening power, which is the abyss. They didn't want humanity to obtain it at all, because it was a threat to this whole peaceful world structure that the heavenly principles fought so hard to obtain for humanity, right? Literally, the heavenly principles claimed Tevat and its fundamental divine powers for itself just to create this little peaceful world for itself and for humanity. But we see the negative effect of that, quote unquote, that peace, that, good intention. When you have Conria, trying to break free from this prison, essentially, that the heavenly principles has created, and anyone who dares to obtain power that's like related to the abyss gets wiped out, as we saw from Jabai's Lancerite story, right, where the abyss had engulfed or was spread around the old civilization in Chinyu Vale. The heavenly principles literally was going to drop a nail on the entire area, but it was stopped by Jabai. So it's like the heavenly principles is being pragmatic, obviously. The abyss has corrupted this area. Even though they're doing everything out of genuine good intention, they are still harming people in the process, right? This is kind of like the whole two things don't make a right. So essentially, honestly, Dottore would literally become the new heavenly principles, honestly, if we're thinking about it. But anyway, back to the video.
Now, whether it's a false reality or not, fact is, living in this false reality wouldn't hurt anyone, and it would be way less painful than having to live in the real world.
I mean, it would be painful because of the fact that, one, someone who isn't even a god, really, someone who is a human being, is restricting you from truly experiencing life. Instead, they got you experiencing bullshit. Only good times. Because, like, here's the thing. As cool as having nothing but fun times happen all the time, if there are real humans living in this quote-unquote dream world where only good things happen all the time, the human brain could only accept so much of that before they're like, yo, there's something wrong here. Not everything's supposed to be sunshines and rainbows. So then they start questioning shit, and start questioning what the freak is going on here. Is this real? Is any of this real? And then boom, we got another Conrian situation again.
World. But let me ask you this. Imagine there's someone who lives in horrific pain every single day. Do you think that person would prefer to live in this infinitely painful reality or in a false reality where they don't feel any pain at all? If
we can look to Star Rail's story for Penacony, this was touched on. But even then, right, as sweet as that sound, they know they have to wake up from their dream because they can't live here. They can't just keep living in the dream. They have to face reality. Because their lives were nothing but pain. You had niggas who were like, yo, I came to this dream so I can experience something new because my life was mundane. You had niggas being like, yo, I am literally on a whole bunch of tubes and wires right now, and that's what's going on in my body right now, and I'm inside the dream because this is the only place I can actually feel like I'm not hooked up to a machine. You had a whole bunch of children who was also in the dreamscape because like they all have their own like mental illnesses and whatnot that were affecting them in their real lives, but it wasn't really affecting them in the dreamscape at all. Some of them, I think one of them didn't have the ability to speak, and I think they could only obtain the ability to speak while in the dream. So they all had everyone had their own reasons for being in the dream, whatever personal struggle it was. But they all knew that they had to wake up from this reality. They had to wake up from the dream, right? Because Sunday, who honestly, I feel like Sunday fits this description that Zom is giving about Dottore way more than Dottore himself. Because Sunday, he wanted to actually create a paradise for humans. He wanted them to experience a sweet dream where everything is lovely, where everything is peaceful, where they're free from harm, from pain, and so on. Because he kind of had to keep seeing that every day of his life, ever since he was a child, up to him like listening to people, confess their personal sins of their lives and the things they've had to do that resulted in hurting people, or they had to do it because they had no other choice but to do X thing. Like, Sunday really wanted to create a paradise for humans, genuinely. And it wasn't out of like trying to deceive anyone. He was doing it because he genuinely believed that this was the only way humanity could be free from pain. On top of the fact, he also had a sister as well, who was a playable character, Robin, who also, got hurt, living life. And it also shook him even more so to be like, yo, I gotta create this paradise. I gotta have everyone under this sweet dream that I control to keep them safe. Right? But in the end, it crumbled because the human desire to live their lives without being dictated by another person or letting someone create their little safe haven for them it's a strong will, and it will fight back against that, regardless if it's made of good, regardless if the dream is made from good intention or not. So it's like, again, if Dottore were to make such a thing, people would naturally rise up and break out of it eventually.
Single day. Do you think that person would prefer to live in this infinitely painful reality or in a false reality where they don't feel any pain at all? If a false reality can give you everything you want, why is it wrong for somebody to live that way? He wouldn't be interested in creating something like this if he was truly evil. You could make the argument that Dottore is only doing this to manipulate the traveler, but I don't think so.
He is. He blatantly is. Because again, as shown earlier with the clip I showed earlier, he is a selfish individual. He is the most selfish.
Because during this dialogue, he also makes it very clear that he doesn't view her as an opponent, and he offers her to work with him based on the argument that not all of her friendships rely on having the same ideals, and a lot of them rely on being beneficial to both sides, which technically isn't wrong.
That's true. However, again, if we think about each and every Harbinger that the Traveler has worked with, none of them have done anything near as egregious as Dottore. Granted, you could argue that for the child, because he awakened Osayo, Overlord of the Vortex, who then proceeded to attack Liyue Harbor. But, I'm going to say this right now, knowing that Osayo failed and didn't kill anybody at all, and their attack was entirely focused on the Jade Chamber, and they got snuffed out by said Jade Chamber, we can go ahead and X out, child from this, of like doing something horrendous, right? Because the quote-unquote almost committed a genocide didn't happen at all. So we're going to excuse my boy. I know someone's going to disagree with that, but listen. If there was no life taken throughout that whole process, we can't call it a genocide. Even the attempt wasn't even an attempt because it failed. Like it was thwarted. It was thwarted. That's not the word. It was It was uprooted. There we go. But anyway, yeah. Like, all these other niggas, like, Columbina hasn't done anything to anybody, so we can't even count her as, like, because, like, again, the Traveler's relationship with all these characters is, like, mutual, in a way, right? Like, the captain wanted to save Natlan. The Traveler was on board with this and agreed. Even withheld information about the captain and what he wanted to do from some of the playable cast during Natlan's Archon quest. Of course, the Traveler revealed it later, what the captain wanted to do in order to save Natlan. Honestly, it didn't feel like the Traveler was opposed to the captain's plan on how they wanted to save Natlan. They did take in consideration, thinking, maybe he has a point, right? Sandrone, she's a friend of Columbina. Sandrone hasn't done anything in the story or towards the Traveler at all that warrants, the Traveler perceiving her as a threat. Child, same thing. Even though they did fight each other, there was still like this level of mutual, I guess, respect for each other, even in Child's story quest as well, when we learn more about him and the reason why he's a Harbinger and why he does what he does, right? And then Arlecchino, again, based on the interactions between the Traveler and Lenny and the other children of House of Hearth, which is why Arlecchino is more than willing to work with the Traveler, and it is a mutual benefit because she does perceive the Traveler as a, let's say, a chip to use on the, you know, on the chessboard, right? In case she may need them if, let's say, the Fatui were to turn against her in the House of the Hearth, because she cares more about the House of the Hearth than the Fatui all day, every day, right? That's like the foundation of every last relationship here. The Traveler's relationship with Dottore, knowing the shit he has done in passing to other people and to Kale as well, like, the Traveler has no reason to be like, I'm going to side with you, bro. They have no reason. They have a whole bunch of reasons why not to.
Later on, he goes on to say something really important once again.
You know, I heard recently that a group of critics reviewed countless stories and drew an interesting conclusion. They found that it is more often than not the villains who strive tirelessly to push the boundaries of progress. Fanatics are trampled down for their transgressions, and those who transcend are rebuked for their audacity. And so, the majority of creatures are too timid to follow my lead. But all sacrifices made during my experiments have been worthwhile, as you can now see. I can offer you something new, something unique, precisely because I am a villain.
He acknowledges that without villains like him, the world wouldn't be able to progress. He's kind of talking like some Reddit mod in this dialogue, but essentially what he's trying to say there is that the only way to progress is by becoming a villain.
I mean, you could say that he's saying that the only way for progress to happen is to become a villain, right? But I feel like it's more so not becoming a villain, but having ambitions that people would perceive as villainous, right? Or people would perceive it as twisted, as something of a madman, right? I think that's more so what he's getting at.
But essentially what he's trying to say there is that the only way to progress is by becoming a villain, since it's impossible to progress if you refuse to go beyond the limits of the norm. So what he means by that is that without people like him, humanity would be stuck and would eventually go extinct anyway. In order to progress, someone has to be willing to make sacrifices. After that, Dottore says something that explains his character really well and essentially justifies his way of thinking. Listen carefully to what he says.
We are eternally bound through mutual interest. Can you truly say you would never turn to malice if it could give you the life you dream of?
We're completely different. I embrace everything that life throws at me. I am engaged in every step of my journey.
How does that make us different? I too embrace what life brings, researching everything that interests me.
Just like to most people, their friends and family are everything, to him, research and experiments are everything. The Traveler, for example, she took the lives of countless of opponents in order to find her brother. She canonically took the lives of countless treasure hunters, Fatui soldiers, people from the desert, and much more. The game, of course, doesn't explicitly say that she took their lives, but if you're in an Archon quest and you have to defeat enemies who disappear after you defeat them, it's pretty obvious what that symbolizes, and it's pretty obvious that she eliminated them. Whether she had her reasons or not, she harmed others for the sake of her own goals.
Yeah, she did. But the thing is, though, I understand that. I know what argument Zolm is using. He's using the argument of, oh, well, we both essentially, in essence, did the same thing. But the thing is, this is where it differs. Your reasoning completely changed, your intention completely changes the entire framework of it all, right? Just because, let's say this, again, back to the example, right? If I attack someone, right? And someone else, or let's say, let's do this. Person 1 attacks an individual. Person 2 also attacks an individual. Okay, both of these people, in essence, attack somebody. But what was the reason why they attacked them, right? That's why we always ask these questions. Even when it's brought to court, like criminal court or like civil court or whatever the fuck, right? Or just in general, we ask the question of what was the reason, right? Because the reason does matter. Person A's reason was, oh, I did it out of self-defense because the person that I attacked was coming at me with a weapon. So therefore, I attacked them back and stopped them. Person's 2 reason was, oh, the person didn't attack me. They were minding their own business, and I just walked up to them and attacked them. So, off rip, because we can tell the reasons for why both people did their action. One person did it out of self-defense, out of self-preservation. The other person did it purely out of malice because they simply wanted to do it. Right? And this like kind of goes into that kind of like leads down the conversation of like, you know, freedom. Because like humanity having the freedom to do whatever it wants, that means humanity also has the freedom to do as much evil as it wants. Literally, I can say this right now. If we did not have laws that said we are not allowed to do XYZ thing to another person to violate their, you know, personal agency or just like their personal space or just like their humanity as a whole, right? We would be all doing some vile shit to people on the daily just because we could, because I have the freedom to do anything I want because this is my life, right? That means I can do whatever I want. That means I can go hurt someone else if I wanted to just because I have the freedom to do so, right? That's why we have laws and restrictions in the first place, to keep that freedom in check. Because your freedom doesn't trump someone else's freedom. Anyway, I know I'm going on a whole spiel, but like you get the point.
Whether she had her reasons or not, she harmed others for the sake of her own goals. So why is it fine for her to do whatever she wants in order to get back to her brother, but not for Dottore? Everyone has to make...
That's... I ain't gonna lie, though. I do remember the first time I initially reacted to this video. That is a... no disrespect to you, bro. But that is a bad, slimy way to phrase that, knowing damn well everything the traveler has done has been out of self-defense, unless it was them pushing on the attack. But even then, it wasn't off rip on attacking someone. It was because they had to respond with force in kind, because they most of the time are being attacked. Right? The traveler doesn't just go and jump someone and just attack someone just cause. No. It's always a reason for why they're doing it. It's because the other side attacked first, so they're responding in kind to that. Like, the traveler doesn't just get to do whatever the fuck they want. They only respond in kind to malice towards them or towards their friends. And thus, they respond in kind to it. The doctor, that nigga does what he wants regardless if someone is aiming malice towards him or not. He doesn't care because he doesn't see that person as worth a damn to him. He only cares about what he wants. That's the difference.
Others for the sake of her own goals. So why is it fine for her to do whatever she wants in order to get back to her brother, but not for Dottore?
Again, it's purely based on morals, right? Even in real life. I know I'm like on the spill right now, but let me have this, okay? Like, even if we were to tie this to real life, right? Like, here we go. Another good example, right? Someone, okay, let's say this. Someone wants to become the number one most influential, let's say, YouTuber or content creator on YouTube. Or rather, we have two individuals who want to do that, right? One individual wants to be the most influential YouTuber on the platform. The other one wants to be the most like sub to individual on the platform, like having the most subs, right? Depending on how both of them go about it, depends on how people will view them. If person A is like grinding hard, they're pumping out videos every day, they're thinking of new ways of like, you know, getting people to sub to their channel and check out their content. They're doing a whole bunch of other things, being extravagant, you know, like, you know, some things like Kai Cenat, like that nigga was doing a lot of crazy stuff, like getting views, getting subs and viewership on his Twitch and whatnot, right? He was doing the most, but nothing he did was like something that was like, oh, that's disgusting how you moving, right? It was purely for the love of the game, for the enjoyment of it all, for the fun, for the entertainment, right? So person A in the scenario I'm bringing is doing all that essentially, but person B, they're being more slimy, they're being a little underhanded, they're view botting themselves, they're like paying people to sub to their channel and like offering them shit in return for subbing their channel, or like, you know, sharing their content around, right? Oh, they're not the ones making the content on their channel. They're just having someone else like pump out like the most trendy shit, like the most lazy ass content possible, right? For example, pure AI slop videos, right? Person 2 is just doing nothing but that, getting all those views, getting all those subs, right? But they're not actually putting forth the effort to make unique, content that speaks to them as a content creator and their drive, their guts, like the blood, sweat, and tears they put into it in comparison to person 1, right? We're gonna view both of those individuals differently, right? And the same thing applies to the Traveler and Dottore.
Everyone has to make sacrifices to achieve their dreams. Why is it suddenly wrong for Dottore to harm others for the sake of his goal, but not for Lumine? Fact is, the answer to that is subjective, and just because my subjective opinion might be different than his, that doesn't make it right or wrong.
I disagree. Now, the reason I say this, because of course I'm coming at this when I say this from a Christian perspective, right? There is an objective right and wrong from the Christian perspective. It is, right? From the Christian perspective, Lumine would, in my opinion, not be seen as like some vile individual for her actions, for trying to like achieve her goal of trying to like, be with her family again, right? Dottore, on the other hand, would be seen as a blasphemous sinner who's spitting in the face of God every breath he takes, for every action he does, because of what he's done to children, what he's done to other people, the harm that he's caused, all for the sake of trying to be like above God, essentially, right? We will not view these two niggas as the same, especially for whatever goal, you know, both individuals got their own personal goals going on. People can sympathize with the whole, oh, you're trying to reunite with your family? I get it. Let me help you with that, right? People can sympathize with that. Everyone can. Everyone cannot sympathize with an individual who seeks to become essentially above God. You're not going to find a lot of people who can sympathize with that. I think that's another different factor in this as well.
But not for Lumine. Fact is, the answer to that is subjective, and just because my subjective opinion might be different than his, that doesn't make it right or wrong. You cannot apply your own understanding of morality to another person if they have a different understanding of morality than you do. This is...
I can't fully agree with that. Not only because from the Christian perspective, right? But also because, you know, for example, I must mention this. Some of y'all may take offense to this, others may not. Let me hit you a little information that a lot of you may not know, right? In the Middle East, or in particular, right? I'm pretty sure it's among the Islam, like the whole teachings of Islam and like whatever, right? Like not just Islam, or there's Islamic states in the Middle East, right? They have laws that allow for them to marry underage girls, literally. I remember seeing this one video from Naxaku, right, where he showed this on. It was a Twitter image or Twitter clip or whatever. It wasn't AI. It was a real video. It was this 8-year-old girl who was being like married off to this 60-year-old man, right? In my opinion, that's genuinely disgusting. And I think a lot of us can agree on that's genuinely disgusting for an 8-year-old girl to be married off to a man who's in his 60s. It don't matter what age, actually. It don't matter if he's 60, 50, 40, 30, 20. It don't fucking matter. That nigga can be 19. Still disgusting, right? Right? Over there, it's seen as morally acceptable because that's what their morals dictate. Over here in America, it's completely different. We're like, no, we're not down for that, which is why we have our laws being like, yo, we do not marry off our young at no 8 years old. The youngest not even the youngest, but like the age that they would even be allowed to even engage in adult behavior is like goes from like 16, 17 to 18 years old, right? That's kind of like the frame of the frame or the time of like age that we would even allow them to do that, depending on the state you live in, right? But like none of these niggas are like fucking 8 years old, or at least over here in America, getting sold off, or not sold off, let me not say that, getting married off at the age of 8, right? It's completely different. Our morals are completely different. And even in that whole scenario, even if we want to be like, oh, the culture is different, I'm pretty sure we all can recognize that a child being married off at the age of 8 is pretty problematic. It's not something that we all can just like be like, oh, we support that, right? Obviously not. Now I know some people are going to feel offended by this, but I think this is a good parallel to what's being said here by Zone. And I think it's worth mentioning for the sake of the argument that's being made, right? That's the only reason I'm mentioning this. Nothing more, nothing less. Right? There is an objective when it comes down to morality. There is an objective good, objective bad when it comes down to morality. In a good handful of cases. Not every case of morality is subjective. Actually, that's the thing, but you know what? Yeah, I was right the first time. Anyway, back to the video.
Is what Dottore is trying to explain to us. But going back to the dialogue between Dottore and the Traveler, the most interesting part about this whole section is when he offers her to give her all the answers she wants and bring her back to her brother.
I know what your ultimate goal is. You wish to walk the path your brother walked and seek answers from him at the end of that journey, don't you?
Someone like you could never understand what it feels like to care about another person the way I care about him.
But that doesn't mean I can't help. I could find your brother right now, bring him before you, and make him give you the answers you seek.
She knows that nobody truly understands her and that nobody will be able to help her except for him, and yet she decides to refuse. To me, this doesn't really make any sense, especially since she acknowledges how nobody ever tried to help her except for Dottore, and
That's not entirely true. People did try to help her in terms of like setting up the flyer posters, but the information that everyone had wasn't enough to go on to be like, oh, I can go this place to find my brother, right? The only person who potentially had that information was Dainsleif, and then the other person was Nahida. So there's that to consider. And also, hold up, let me rewind.
him, and yet she decides to refuse. To me, this doesn't really make any sense, especially since she acknowledges how nobody ever tried to help her except for Dottore.
Okay, there's another thing as well, right? Let's say this. Let's say if the Traveler did accept Dottore's help, and he managed to drag whatever sibling, right, straight right then and there in the story. Honestly speaking, objectively speaking, it would have been bad, because every little piece of important shit that the Traveler themselves need to learn about for themselves would essentially be handed to them on a silver platter, right? And the Traveler doesn't really roll like that. The Traveler isn't this lazy individual who wants shit handed to them. They actually go and seek it themselves and obtain those answers themselves, right? For example, when the Traveler got to the spaceship and checked the spaceship logs, right, about about what happened, because they had to question their own memories related to what happened to the spaceship and how did Lumine end up outside the spaceship, right? Technically, the Traveler still didn't get the answer to how exactly that Lumine ended up outside the spaceship. But we did find out that the spaceship did stop to Teyvat not once, but twice. Thanks to the ship logs. And because of that, right, that after finding that out, it then leads us to the conversation with Columbina and Traveler, and Columbina asking the Traveler, essentially, do you perceive Teyvat as your home, right? If the Traveler were to accept the Traveler's, if the Traveler were to accept Dottore's help in this moment in the story, right? Well, let me go back. In this moment in the story, if the Traveler accepted Dottore's help right here, we wouldn't have that great character moment of the traveler saying, yo, Tevat is my home. I view this place as my home. Because they spent so much time being in this world. As I said, they've walked through every corner of this world, not all of it yet, and they've intermingled with the people of this world. They've savored, they've taken every step in, like, walking in this world with pride, loving every moment of it, the ups and downs, everything, right? If the traveler had not had accepted the Dottores' help here and there, they wouldn't have that great character moment. So it's actually really good that they declined it. And because Dottore is not a trustworthy individual as well, because he will backstab niggas for the benefit of himself. We have seen that.
And that nobody will be able to help her except for him, and yet she decides to refuse. To me, this doesn't really make any sense, especially since she acknowledges how nobody ever tried to help her except for Dottore, and I'm pretty sure they had to do this for the sake of the story. But I don't know, I think it's pretty unrealistic that Lumine doesn't even consider it. She doesn't even try to cooperate with him at all. I think that's pretty unrealistic.
I disagree. It's not unrealistic, especially with everything we've learned about Dottore before this moment in the story. He can say all this sweet stuff all he wants. Again, he can play this whole sophistry all he wants. As again, back to this definition, right? Using deception, twisted logic, and emotional appeals, right? Right here and right now, in this whole moment, he is using emotional appeal, right? Even the traveler can recognize it, saying, this is a malicious attempt to manipulate me. But at the same time, he's stating some very human truths, right? The traveler can recognize that he's being manipulative, at least emotionally. But he is touching on some honest truths related to the traveler, obviously. But he's doing that for the sake of deception and manipulation, to get the traveler to join their side, aka the emotional appeal. Nothing more, nothing less. Again, knowing the crimes and atrocities he has done to other people that the traveler knows themselves, from Kale to Wanderer to what he did with Niwa and the furnace, like, to what we found out that he did in Sumeru in relation to, like, Layla's ancestor, like, and that, you know, for abandoned, destroyed hospital that's in Sumeru as well, next to Aru village. Like, this nigga got a rack of human atrocities on his soul that he has done. The traveler most definitely has every piece of common sense not to join forces with them, even with the power he possesses, right? Knowing the shit he has already done. And of course, what the traveler didn't see, but the players did see, again, him, you know, fusing the minds of humans into animals, and those humans essentially experiencing the death of the self and becoming full-blown animal. So it's like, and then he hurt the traveler's friends as well. So, like, that on top of this is like, it makes 100% sense why the traveler wouldn't accept the Dottore's offer, no matter how enticing it is.
Anyway, when going back to their dialogue at the beginning of the last act, Dottore states another fact that's very significant when it comes to understanding who he is and why he thinks the way he does.
I wonder if you don't understand humans all that well. They are very pragmatic creatures who understand only that which they can perceive with their senses. If I had you sit here for a week, I imagine people might sympathize. But if I left you here for 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years, the sheer size of that number would cause it to lose all meaning to them. They would not have the capacity to comprehend your suffering, and thus they could not empathize. Their lives.
He's making that claim, but knowing that the traveler has friends who were what's crazy is, in this moment that he's sitting here saying this, right? The traveler's friends are actively trying to save the traveler. So even with the claim of, oh, if I left you here for a week, to up to like 10,000 years, people would cease to care about it, right? Because humans are pragmatic creatures. I don't agree, especially knowing the friends that the traveler has made. the alliances he's made, the people across Tevat from all forms of government that the Traveler has entangled themselves with, these niggas would bend over backwards to save the Traveler. They would. They've shown it time and time again that they would. Because that's how impactful the Traveler has been to their nations and to their lives. Right?
Number would cause it 1,000 or 10,000 years. If I left you here for 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years, the sheer size of that number would cause it to lose all meaning to them. They would not have the capacity to comprehend your suffering, and thus they could not empathize.
Even with that, there is a whole bunch of... We have a handful of playable characters or humans that exist in the story who are long-lived species. Right, so they would be able to be able to understand. Alice would be able to understand. Nicole would be able to understand as well. Who's another lifelong species? Ian-san would be able to understand. Seatlali would be able to understand. Actually, I don't even know how old Skirk is. Honestly, I really don't know how old she is, but I'm pretty sure she would be able to understand. Zhongli, Venti, Nahida, Farina, most definitely Farina would be able to understand. She would relate 1-to-1, my nigga. And she's human. She's been alive for 500 years, for crying out loud. She most definitely would be able to understand and comprehend, regardless of how many, if it's a 10,000 years. Like, honestly, Dottore's whole view of humanity shows that he does not have friends at all who understand him, nor do he understand people. And he can only perceive them in this really pragmatic way. And that's, again, that differentiates the Traveler from Dottore entirely. Because the Traveler doesn't view people like this. Only Dottore does.
The size of that number would cause it to lose all meaning to them. They would not have the capacity to comprehend your suffering, and thus they could not empathize. Their lifespans are so limited, their bodies so fragile. Did you ever really hope that they could begin to understand someone like you? Your long life and unique origins make you fundamentally different from them. How long will it be before they start to treat you like the alien you are? Before you are ostracized? Out.
See, he's using the emotional appeal. This is why she said, or the Traveler said, that this is sophistry that the Dottore is doing. Emotional appeal. He's doing it right now. Right? And again, his claim would hold weight if the Traveler never had friends at all throughout this entire story. And they were only alone by themselves. Even Paimon, let's assume Paimon, the Traveler never came across Paimon, right? All this that the Dottore is saying would be true, because we know that the Traveler could not speak the native language of Tevat without Paimon's help. Paimon taught them the language of Tevat, the common tongue of Tevat, right? If Paimon didn't exist at all, the Traveler would be wandering across the entirety of Tevat by themselves, unable to speak the native language and tongue, and just be wandering about. People would view them as an alien, because it's like, bro, we can't understand you. You can use all the elements without a vision. Something's off about you. What type of creature are you, right? But thanks to the fact that the Traveler has Paimon and has made friends along the way, kind of thanks to Paimon as well, again, right? The Traveler has never experienced this outcome of people treating them differently because that they're an alien life form, or people have never ostracized the Traveler either, right? Literally, the tribal quest with Seatlali, right? Seatlali can live about probably around the same amount of time as the Traveler can. I'm pretty sure Seatlali probably was stricken with immortality as well, right? So it's like the Traveler has so many friends who are long-lived species who will literally be there for them, to even vouch for them if people were to turn against the Traveler, right? You got so many people who can vouch for the Traveler and be in their back pocket, from the Adeptus to the to New Valette, to the Archons that we've met, right? So many people can vouch for this nigga.
Outcast.
We as humans cannot comprehend something we haven't seen or experienced yet. It's impossible. This is why things like empathy don't really make any sense for him. If other humans are unable to understand how you feel, what's the point of even trying to find someone who understands you? What's the point of trying to fit in if your ideas are beyond their understanding? If Lumine wasn't as powerful as she is and she didn't look human, there's a good chance people would treat her differently and treat her more like an alien. Lumine.
True. Honestly, I think the power mention also is kind of like irrelevant because it don't even matter if they have power or not. If they didn't look human, they would be treated differently, most definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And also, you know, the language barrier too would also be problematic for the traveler.
There's a good chance people would treat her differently and treat her more like an alien. Lumine is very well aware of that, just like she is aware of the fact that even though she always helped others, she never actually got rewarded for it. So everything Dottore is stating there is simply the truth.
I mean, that's not entirely true. The traveler has been rewarded for helping people. That's not entirely true. Now, the whole thing in like the progression of like helping the traveler find their sibling, that's the only thing people really couldn't do. The only thing they could do was put up missing person posters. That's the only thing the traveler could do because the traveler had no information on their sibling, nor did the people of these nations, because one, the Abyss siblings' journey around Tevat was 500 years ago. So no one would have known this. Granted, we have done world quests. The traveler has canonically done world quests where they have gone in and explored areas where their Abyss sibling was present, like in Sumeru with the Arnar quest. I know people hate that quest, but their sibling was there in Sumeru during the time of the Cataclysm, 500 years ago, both from that world quest and from the Caribbear quest.
And finally, the most important part about this section is when Dottore offers the traveler a life of complete freedom to the point where she would be allowed to harm others without any consequences and without being held accountable.
Believe me, such a life is but one small step away.
Why would you offer me that?
The creation of a world is the ultimate scientific experiment. I have taken my research to the highest level, where I shall be not just a god, but also a servant to many sacred spirits. I shall heed the truth and perform holy deeds.
Everything he's saying is true, but is not coming from a place of genuine love and earnest. Again, in comparison to Sunday, this nigga Dottore is the devil. He's saying all these sweet things, right? But ultimately, it's self-serving. He can sit here and say that I will be a servant to many sacred spirits, and I shall heed truth and perform holy deeds. He can say this all he wants to. Guess what? The devil has said the same thing. The devil does the same shit, right? I've been told so many times growing up, you know, going to church every Sunday or throughout the week, that the devil gives out miracles too, right? Not just God, the devil does it too. So it's like, that's kind of where I'm coming from, where I'm viewing him talking and knowing all this vile shit that he has done prior to this moment. So that's why I'm viewing him the way that I am. Like even this, the creation of a world is the ultimate scientific experiment. He's not seeing the creation of a world beyond a scientific experiment, right? Because if you're this, you know, great and benevolent God, why would you see the world as a scientific experiment? Why wouldn't you see the world as your creation that you wish to give all your love to, right? Look at Sunday again. Look at Sunday. Look at Cyrene from Amphorius, right? Everything she did, right? The Aeon of Remembrance, Cyrene. Everything she did was out of love, right? So it's like, again, comparing Sunday and Cyrene to like Dottore, legitly Dottore is the devil.
I shall heed the truth and perform holy deeds. A god's laboratory is the perfect playground.
Dottore not only says that he wants to be a servant to sacred.
Here's the thing,
Perfect playground.
Look, he said it's the perfect playground, but it needs the right occupant to explore its full potential. Right? Again, he's not viewing being a god and creating a world as like this beautiful, benevolent, miraculous moment. He's viewing it solely as an experiment. There's no love behind any of that.
Dottore not only says that he wants to be a servant to sacred spirits, but also that he wants to perform holy deeds, and this is what really caught my attention. Holy deeds, by definition, are morally righteous actions, so if Dottore wants to perform holy deeds in this new world, it would mean that he wants to bring some sort of justice or peace to this new world.
Again, the entire foundation of Zome's argument is hinging greatly on the assumption that Dottore is doing this out of like a morally righteous good in his heart, in his soul. But we know that's not the case. Right? That's like the foundation of Zome's entire argument for why Zome, not Zome, but why Dottore isn't like this evil individual, right?
Which once again proves that Dottore isn't necessarily just evil. Anyway, by this point, you might wonder, why am I showing you guys all this? Why is all of this so important, and why do I keep glazing Dottore so much? Well,
I know where that scene is from, because that's from Kagaguri. I did watch it. I haven't finished watching it, but I did get up to season 2. It was a great watch. I'm not gonna lie. I may have to rewatch it. Hold on, let me go back to this point that he mentioned about this holy deed stuff.
Servant to sacred spirits, but also that he wants to perform holy deeds, and this is what really caught my attention.
I'm trying to figure out how I want to respond. Holy deed. With the holy deed point, of course, the inhabitants of his experimental world that he creates would see everything he does as a holy deed, because, or even he would call it holy deeds. But knowing that he would create a world that allows for the traveler to do whatever the fuck they want, and at the same time, people would also live in that world alongside the traveler, right? It's like, what exactly are these holy deeds? Right? He can sit here and say, I'll perform holy deeds, but what exactly would those be, right? If he did become the new god of the world, right? Honestly, I feel like the traveler could have asked that question. I just think the traveler was too busy like trying to figure out what the fuck this nigga Dottore was really on, right? Because I would have pressed him on that, asking him about, okay, what exactly is these holy deeds would you do? Because depending on what your moral compass is for these quote-unquote holy deeds is going to tell me whether or not these are genuine holy deeds, or you're just claiming that they're holy deeds because you will be a god by design. You would have divine power because people revere gods in a holy light. No one looks at a god in a devilish light, right? So, of course, your deeds would be considered quote-unquote holy deeds. But what exactly are those deeds, Dottore?
Holy deeds, by definition, are morally righteous actions, so if Dottore wants
righteous, God-inspired actions such as of charity, devotion, and moral integrity. Look, this says moral integrity. This nigga Dottore does not have moral integrity. Perform to reflect faith, piety, and spiritual commitment. Again, this nigga Dottore does have none of this shit. He has devotion to he, himself, and I. Right? That's where he has devotion to. He doesn't have moral integrity, because if he did, he wouldn't experiment on children. And we do have an objectivity when it comes down to morals for certain things, obviously. As I mentioned before in this reaction. And not only that, if he were to have become a god, what exactly would his divine commands be and promote spiritual growth? Like, Dottore wouldn't even promote spiritual growth, honestly. This nigga would just be like, yo, you're part of my experiment. I'm gonna tell you the truth. You are nothing more than a subject for my experiment. That's all this is to me. Nothing more, nothing less. Because he doesn't value human life at all. He's never valued human life. If he did, he would never experiment on them children. He never would have done what he did in them Hollow Zero domes that were expanding as, you know, this conversation between, you know, Dottore and the Traveler was happening. Like, again, knowing all this shit that he has done throughout this act is like, it does not make him look any better than how Zome is trying to like argue in favor of him actually doing this out of like the goodness of his heart. Again, no shit towards Zome, obviously. But I think the argument isn't as strong as he may have thought it was as he was like typing it up. That's just me personally.
Wants to perform holy deeds in this new world, it would mean that he wants to bring some sort of justice or peace to this new world, which once again proves that Dottore isn't necessarily just evil. Anyway, by this point, you might wonder, why am I showing you guys all this? Why is all of this so important, and why do I keep glazing Dottore so much? Well, as I said at the start of the video, a lot of you guys don't understand him and what he represents. Many people think that Dottore is just an evil psychopath with no emotions at all, or that he's a bad character overall because of the things he does. But if you genuinely think that, you simply fail to comprehend what he's talking about and what he represents.
I understand what he represents, but the thing is, obviously, he represents freedom. He represents, he's not shamelessness, selfishness as well. What's another one? Unshackled. No, that's the same thing as freedom. Unbound by norms. Controversial. That's a word we can use. He's controversial as well, right? He's all these things, right? But the thing is, someone can be all those things while also being evil, right? Or being a good person. It's two things at the same time. A good person can be controversial, right? Depending on someone's view of them, right? Or what action said person has criticized said good person of, right? So it's like, it's kind of 50. It goes both ways.
First of all, he does have emotions and he's not completely emotionless, even though a lot of people seem to think that. In these dialogues, for example, he even mentions that he can get angry and that he feels bad for her. So,
hold up. That's quite an accusation. Are you expecting me to get angry with you? Well, this is one aspect in which my personal growth has served me well. Right? He's basically saying that he's matured past like being upset at someone throwing accusations at him because he doesn't care about that stuff no more. He doesn't care about that, right? He doesn't care about someone accusing him of something because it's irrelevant to him, right? Because he's only focused on he, himself, and I. He doesn't care about the opinions of other people, which is why he does what he does without shame. Because, you know, he represents freedom. Honestly, he does represent like the purest form of freedom by doing whatever the fuck he wants, regardless if it hurts people. That's what true freedom is, honestly. Living your life at the expense of other people. That's what true freedom is. He doesn't let laws bound him or bind him. He doesn't let morality bind him. He doesn't allow social norms to bind him. He doesn't let nothing bind him down from his freedom. Two, as I mentioned again,
Now I think he's attempting their power to become Anya's pens, but for Nibelung. And that's why Dottore wanted their power to become a pseudo-descender. He wanted to become an author, so the world could no longer control him, he would control the world.
Boom. Basically, that's why he doesn't care about being accused of something. That's why he won't get angry about it, because he doesn't care about that shit. He cares about himself and I, and his goal that he seeks to achieve.
So clearly, he does have feelings, except he has a different perception of them compared to everyone else, as he explained to us multiple times. And this...
Oh, hold up. Let's read that line. In the past, my less mature self might have been disappointed, perhaps even angry over a small setback like this, like when you and Lesser Lord Kusanali joined forces.
Perception of them compared to everyone else.
To oppose me, for example, right? Again, he's showing that he's matured past that. He doesn't care. He's not going to let his emotions drive him on that, because, like, yeah, it is what it is, basically, is what he's saying. My lesser mature self, my younger self, would have been like, oh man, I'm gonna crash out on this, man, how dare you. But, like, again, this nigga is the most selfish, but at the same time, this is the most matured state of being that he's in, so he's not gonna care about that.
He explained to us multiple times, and this is one of the things that make him so unique. But now let me explain what he represents as a character. And
honestly, he can get angry. He does show emotion, right? But it's like he only shows emotion towards things that's like something that like irritates him. Honestly, because the only emotion we've ever seen him have is like when he's literally smoking our packs in the boss fight, and when we're like pressing his shit in the boss fight, and when the Traveler like backstabs him, literally. This nigga is like, how disappointing, right? He's clearly frustrated or agitated by the Traveler's actions in that moment.
And why it's so hard to understand. Once again, this will be mentally challenging, so only watch this if you're ready for some very difficult concepts. In my opinion, Dottore mainly represents two things: perspective and selfishness. Let me start with perspective. The reason why I chose it is because the more we talk to Dottore, the more we learn about how subjective good and evil are, depending on one's perspective. For example, from a thief's perspective, robbing another person might feel like the right thing to do. What if they desperately need money to save somebody's life? But from the perspective of the victim who's getting robbed, it will feel absolutely terrible and not good at all. Now, I'm not saying robbery is good or that it should be encouraged, of course not. But the question is, whose perspective matters more? The perspective of the robber who really needed that money, or the victim who just got robbed?
It's obviously the victim, duh, right? Now, this is no disrespect towards Zom in this regard, but I'm answering the question, obviously. We would all say that the person, getting robbed is the one whose perspective is absolutely right. Even though we can understand the robber's perspective, they are still blatantly in the wrong for this action, regardless.
Whose perspective matters more and why? The truth is, there is no definitive answer. It's completely subjective. The same goes for Dottore and the Traveler. Both of them have their own reasons for the way they act, and as Dottore explained, it's impossible for us to fully comprehend another person's perspective. From a logical standpoint, it's impossible to say if one person is truly worse than the other. You can say that one person is a threat or that this person is dangerous, but it's physically impossible to determine if one person is truly good or bad. And this is one of the things we can learn from Dottore. Before you judge another person, keep in mind that they're fundamentally different from you, and you never know why they act a certain way. A great lesson from Dottore right there. Also, before we move on,
which we can agree to, obviously, naturally.
Another thing that we have to keep in mind when it comes to perspective, especially in this case, is that Dottore never really had a home, and he was also kicked out of the academia, so these things probably had a huge factor in Dottore's evolution. But how does Dottore represent selfishness? Well, first of all, he obviously prioritizes his own goals and his research above everything and everyone else. It's very obvious, but the question is selfishness even a bad thing? If so, then why? Interestingly, Dottore, who many would consider the most selfish person, is also the only person who actually understood the Traveler and offered to give her everything she ever wanted. Now,
honestly, I'm gonna say this. I don't believe that Dottore genuinely understood the Traveler. Everything they were saying was based in logic, or rather, should I say, twisted logic and emotional appeal. That was the foundation of every word that came out of Dottore's mouth. Because Dottore is a logical person. He's a calculating person. Someone like that would only be able to provide the facts about an individual without genuinely, truly understanding the feelings of the other individual, which is why the traveler does not side with Dottore, regardless of him being like, oh, I could give you this, I can give you that, right? Because Dottore, no matter how much he can give, he cannot truly fathom and understand the traveler. He can't. He genuinely can't. He lacks the genuine human emotions to be able to understand the traveler, because can only understand the traveler by just reading up on the information that he himself knows about the traveler. That's the only thing he can do, and try to emotionally appeal to the traveler's emotions, along with the facts that they know about the traveler.
Well, obviously, he did that out of selfishness to convince the traveler to join him, but still, despite the fact that he was acting out of pure selfishness, he was able to give the traveler what no one else could. So if his selfishness allows him to give the traveler something that no one else was able to give her, is selfishness really that bad? If it wasn't for his selfishness, he wouldn't have been able to create a painless false reality, nor to give the traveler what she was always asking for. And this is why Dottore represents selfishness. Whenever we look at Dottore and his interactions, it forces us to think about things like that. But now that we know what he represents, let me explain why all of these things make him such a perfect antagonist compared to everyone else. To start with, unlike all the previous antagonists, it's really hard to say if Dottore is truly evil or not. There is a big difference between doing something out of hatred.
I think we can confidently say that this nigga is evil. We can. I don't know about this idea that we can't in comparison to other antagonists. Right? I don't know about that. Like, even Wanderer. I won't even deem Wanderer as truly an evil individual when he really wasn't. Right? The same thing goes with the captain. Like, El Senora is kind of questionable whether or not she's truly evil as well, knowing what her past was. But the only thing we've seen of El Senora before her eventual passing was nothing but her, attacking Venti, to her being there in Leeway Harbor, explaining why everything happened the way that it did, and that Zhang Li, the Geo Archon, wasn't actually dead, and so on and so forth. Right? So we didn't really get to truly understand her background in the main story. You can only understand it via reading artifact sets or whatever. But like, if we go back to every Harbinger we've come across, I don't know if we can truly say that every last one of them was evil, or they were either between good or evil without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the captain, we could easily say that nigga wasn't evil. He was clearly a good individual, obviously. Wanderer was clearly a hurt individual. I wouldn't really deem him evil. Child, I wouldn't deem him truly evil either. It's like problematic potentially. Threat, yes, depending on the situation. What another Harbinger we came across? Columbina. There's nothing evil about Columbina to begin with. I don't like even good. We can't really say that she was even good because we didn't understand who she was anyway. I don't think she even understood who she was or what she was. So we can't really label good or evil on her anyway. She was kind of like a blank slate until we progressed through the story and she evolved as a character.
And doing something out of passion. Dottore is not doing all of this because he likes to harm others or because he wants to harm people. He simply does it for the sake of his research, which means everything to him. And it's impossible for us to truly judge him.
And that brings harm to people. Again, the Hollow Zero bubble domes that he was making while he was having this conversation with the Traveler. So I think we can judge him on him being evil regardless of his like scientific endeavors that he's on.
Of his research, which means everything to him. And it's impossible for us to truly judge him if we don't even know his end goal. What if he's sacrificing thousands of lives to save millions? What if his plan is to save humanity? We have no clue about that. With all the previous antagonists, it was a completely different story. With characters like Arlecchino, Capitano, or even Tartaglia, they had a pretty clear mindset, and they all seemed evil at first on the outside, but once we met them in person, it turned out they're actually pretty friendly, and they're not as evil as we thought. With Dottore, however, we don't really know what his ultimate end goal is, nor do we have a clear picture of his feelings, since Dottore has a completely different view on morality than all the other characters.
I think we can clearly pinpoint what his goal is, especially with the clip I provided earlier from Ashikai. I think it's pretty clear. Shoot, even in this cutscene where where Dottore gets the moon arrows, right? And after he loses one of them, right? He's like, "Stubborn world, don't control me," right? So he's clearly trying to break free from the shackles of fate. I think he even like alludes to it. He even says it in like one of the final cutscenes for the boss fight. He even says, "How can willfully ignorant? How can y'all be fine with your fate, that you've been given to by this world?" Right? He says, "Once I transcend fate, you will be nothing more been like guinea pigs for my experiment." So it's kind of easy to tell what his end goal is, especially with the dialogue that was in that in the scene for the fight. Let me go back to the video.
And that aside, apart from Rerir, he's the only villain that constantly raises valid questions and genuinely makes you think. For example, if Dottore actually were to become the new god, would it really be that bad? Because at least in Teyvat, the gods are not all loving or all forgiving. They just do whatever they want. There's still a lot of crisis and a lot of people suffering either way. If Dottore wants to fix that by
Wait, hold up. Yeah, there's a lot of crisis and things happening, but the gods don't sit there and don't do nothing. From that line alone is almost implying like the Archons just let shit happen and they don't do anything. They don't get involved with it, which we know isn't true, because like if that was the case, Vinci would have never tried to stop Dvalin in Leeway Harbor. The whole point of like everything happening, it may have seemed like, oh, Zhongli was just letting shit happen, but but that wasn't really the case, because knowing that he wanted to see how humanity will handle themselves without him being there, and they showed up and showed out most definitely, right, along with the Adeptus. And then in Inazuma, right, granted the conflict in Inazuma was caused by the Archon herself, but we also know that the Fatui also was putting more pressure on that. So that's more so not a situation or crisis created beyond the Archon. That was more so the Archon herself. So I don't think we can really count this one. So Sumeru, right? We know the sages was doing their shit. They had literally locked Nahida away for 500 years up till right now. So it was literally impossible for her to do anything. So shit really did just happen, or a crisis started building in Sumeru. But we all know that Nahida didn't have the power to fight back against that at all until we broke her free, and then she started putting her foot down, right? And then Fontaine, things weren't really allowed to happen when the Hydro Archon was literally working through a plan out that literally saved everyone in Fontaine, including Farina. What was in Natlan? Mavwika was active in saving Natlan from the abyss. Very active. So I don't know about the gods not doing anything, unless you're talking about the gods of the gods, that is the beings in Celestia, as they're watching over everything and seemingly letting things happen. But it's clear that they can only do shit that's allowed via the rules, as they state in the Teyvat or in the Nodcry teaser trailer, that they can only do things that they're going to get involved, but they have to do it within the realm of like following the rules established by the Heavenly Principles. which is why we don't really see them. Like, we don't see Istaroth or Naborius or even the Shade of Death. Shit, her name is Renova. There we go. Like, we don't see these characters in the story being active in the crises because that's not their job to deal with that. That's the purpose of the Archons. That's for them to deal with, not the celestial gods, because they're meant to just simply observe, unless, you know, the rules dictate for them to be involved. Because even like Renova, she was like, yo, if the heavenly principles finds out that I helped you, like, with your crisis, like fighting against the abyss, I'm going to feign ignorance and say that you stole my fucking power. And she said that to Shibalanke, the first power archon. She made that clear. So they kind of do try to help, but they have to do it within the rules. And they clearly fear what might happen to them if the Heavenly Principles finds out that they're helping humanity, which potentially may be against the rules set by the Heavenly Principles, right?
Gods are not all loving or all forgiving. They just do whatever they want. There's still a lot of crisis and a lot of people suffering either way. If Dottore wants to fix that by providing a false reality in which there is no pain, why shouldn't Dottore become a god himself? The entire cast of characters is constantly so mad about the idea of Dottore becoming a god, but do they even know why? If you truly think about this,
I mean, he did say it in the battle. I don't think they need to understand more than what he said out of his own mouth. Which, let me do this right quick. I know this reaction is a long reaction. Forgive me. Versus everyone.
You're looking well.
Weak rely on each other for comfort. So dull. Only the weak rely on each other for comfort.
You shall see.
Once I transcend fate, you will be nothing but fodder for my grand experiment!
That will never happen.
So, knowing that, he literally threatened them. So even if he were to create this little peaceful paradise, he legitimately just threatened their lives. I think they have every reason to bite back against him trying to become a god and slap his shit to the floor. With this threat in mind, this nigga would... oh my goodness, don't even get me started on the fact that this nigga, Dottore, literally almost killed Nefer for daring to sneak in on his conversation with the Traveler. He almost took her life, and she got saved by Nicole.
what's so wrong with a mortal trying to become a god? What's so different between Dottore and the gods if both of them are equally as evil and selfish? The current gods of Teyvat are certainly not any better than Dottore. Anyway, the point is, Dottore was...
I don't really agree with that. I personally disagree with that, in my opinion.
Asking countless valid and thought-provoking questions, which is something we haven't really seen before. Who decides what's right and wrong? How far are you willing to go to achieve your dreams? At what point does ambition cross a line? Is there even a line you shouldn't cross? And if so, then why? I could go on and on about Dottore and all these things, but overall, he's a philosophical masterpiece of a character, and we probably won't see a character like that again in the near future.
I wouldn't really say that, but that's like a 50-50. But yes, everything you did say about Dottore is true. He is a very interesting character that is very thought-provoking. That is true. I won't deny that.
But with that being said, if you watch this entire video, I want to give you something back, so comment your UID and your server. The first 3 comments with their UID and server will get a free...
I think that's the end of the video. I don't think I need to say anything else. Anyway, this was a really good video. Granted, of course, I expressed my disagreements for a handful of takes that were given and assumptions on the intention behind Dottore's actions that Zome believes are like good intentions. It's just him going about it the wrong way or something like that, right? He can clarify to me in the comment section below. But yeah, this was a good video. I liked it. Of course, I gave it a like, obviously, show my support. I think I said everything I need to say in the reaction. Like, sub, turn on notification bell, join my YouTube community Discord if you want. Also, download the Root app. It's an alternative to Discord, which I will be using the moment Discord makes their update. Check out my yapping topics and yapping reaction content. Playlists for both videos are available for all to watch. I stream here on YouTube and YouTube only. I play 5 gacha games and 2 non-gacha games. That's going to turn into 4 soon. These games in total being Genshin, Star Rail, Zenless, Wuwa, and Ardent Sinfield. I will be playing that until I bang out the final, the prologue, or the first 2 chapters, I guess. I'm like halfway through that for Ardent Sinfield. I will be streaming Star Rail this week as well, so look out for that. The 2 non-gacha games I play are Gravity Rush Remastered and Fate Semi Remnant. The 2 other games I will be adding to the non-gacha games are Gravity Rush, not Gravity Rush, but Tales of Berseria Remastered for PS5 and Ninja Gaiden 4 for PS5. So check those out when I eventually stream them. Anyway, this is KallaTheYapper signing out, and I'll see y'all in the next reaction. Peace.